Here's what I know about your life. Wherever you are in your life today is a result of the cycles and the rhythms that you've been living. Now, that can be good or bad. So today, what I want to do is start a series of talks called Cycle Breakers. We're going to talk about breaking destructive cycles and building life-giving ones. Let's go. Welcome to the Purpose Project podcast. We're going to begin a series of talks today that we're going to call Cycle Breakers. And the idea is to discuss the truths of the cycles that we all, not just you, not just me, everybody listening, everybody in your life, walk through daily and what it looks like to take intentional care toward walking toward the purpose that God has in your life and breaking destructive cycles, wherever those cycles may be. Maybe it's in your marriage, maybe it's professionally, spiritually, personally, maybe it's fitness-wise, wherever you are, to walk towards the purposes of God in those areas of our lives. It's a new year, right? And so it's a great time to begin discussing, what do I need to do to accomplish some goals, to accomplish some outcomes, to get to some areas of my life that I feel like God's called me to, or areas of my life that I'm ready to jump into. And it's time to stop making excuses for what we don't like. Listen, I'm going to get right into it today. Some of us listening to this podcast today, we have become professional excuse makers. Hey, I don't like my outcome, but it just is what it is. No, you get to change it. So we're going to talk about breaking these cycles and moving toward all that God has for us in our lives over the next year, and what that can look like. Now, here's the goal of this entire series of talks. It is not just to have podcast content. It's not for you to listen on the way to work or at home or in the gym or wherever you're listening to this or watching this. The goal is that it's practical applications that we apply to our lives, not just once, but continually, and continue to think on, pray through, and work through so that we can get to a place where it's no more excuses. Now we're making progress. It's time to get out of the spin cycle of destruction. Everybody listening to this, I've already said this, but I want to reiterate something. Everybody, every single one of us is a product of the cycles that we've been living. Now, some of the cycles are good and things are going well in that area of our lives, and some of them are destructive. We're living things that we don't want, that we didn't sign up for, if you will, but we got to a destination and we're kind of like, how did I get here? Now, you've probably learned by now, I'm very much a rhythms, cycles, disciplines kind of guy. I believe in that. I think it's powerful. I live my life by that. And the reality is, financially, spiritually, physically, professionally, personally, wherever you are in life, we're all products of the cycles that we continue to live out. As I was preparing for this, I thought about this illustration. As a kid, we used to go to this park not far from our house. And my church, actually, growing up, would often rent out this park for Easter celebrations or summertime picnics or whatever, where we'd all come together and we'd all hang out. And at this park, there was a massive merry-go-round. I don't know if you listening to this, if you remember merry-go-rounds, right? But there was a merry-go-round on this thing. Number one, they're dangerous because it's sitting in the summer sun in the South Carolina heat. Man, you touch that thing and it is like touching straight fire. It burns you. But we would jump on this merry-go-round and we'd get 3 or 4 of our friends together on this merry-go-round. And somebody would grab the merry-go-round and begin spinning, just running as fast as we can. And 2 or 3 of us would do it and we'd spin this thing the fastest we could get it going. And people were hanging on and there was a point in the spin cycle of this merry-go-round to where, honestly, it would get going so fast and so hard that you would just sit there and wait on it to slow down, right? Maybe you've been in that situation on a merry-go-round or something like that, to where you're just sitting there and you're like, if I jump off of this thing, it's going to hurt, and it's going to hurt bad. Or you get thrown off of it because it's going so fast. So what you do is you'd sit towards the middle, you'd grab the handlebars or the bars around the merry-go-round and you would hold on for dear life. And you'd wait for the cycle, you'd wait for the merry-go-round to slow down just enough that you could jump off and collect your thoughts again and try not to throw up and get sick once you get on level ground again. And as I thought about that idea, I thought about how that's a lot of our lives, right? It's a lot of how we feel in our lives, that life gets moving so fast with the responsibilities of finances and work and kids and marriage and personal and spiritual and all these things taking place. And the merry-go-round of life just spins and spins and spins. And there comes a point where many of us, it's like, I just have to ride. I have to ride the spin cycle out. I have to just hunker down, hold on, and hope it slows down. The issue with that mentality is it often never slows down. Life very rarely slows down on its own. In all honesty, I believe that the enemy, the devil of our lives, often wants it to speed up because we'll hunker down in those cycles. And the reality is, for many of us, we're sitting in a cycle that we don't like, waiting on it to slow down, but life is not going to slow down. The only way you're going to get off this cycle, the only way that you're going to break destructive cycles in your life, whether it's marriage, finances, wherever you are, the reality is the only way you're going to do it is you have to slow it down. You have to make a decision to either jump off the merry-go-round, the cycle of life that you're on, or you have to find a way that we're going to talk about in the next couple of weeks to intentionally interrupt the spinning so that you can get off of this thing. Now, the problem with that is this. When we prefer familiarity over new ways forward, destructive cycles result every time. So when I prefer, or I would even say it like this, when I worship being familiar or comfortable over moving forward, what happens is I get stuck in this thing because I don't want to move. There's a danger to jumping off. There's a danger to stopping the cycle. There's a danger to changing something. It doesn't feel good. It's not right. And so we'll sit in this comfort, we'll sit in this familiar place, and we'll just wait on it to slow down. And I'm just telling you, it's not going to. You have to slow it down. And so this series of talks, we're going to talk about the cycle that every one of us goes through. There's a certain cycle all of us go through that leads to the outcomes of our lives. And then we're going to talk about how do we intentionally interrupt the cycle, slow it down, and then how do we walk through this thing and get where God's leading us. Now, here's the cycle all of us, including me, all of us walk through this one cycle every single day, and it always leads to the outcome of our lives. Here's what it is. It starts with your thoughts. Okay, so the cycle that we go through starts with a thought. Everything starts with a thought. We're going to break all this down over the next couple of weeks. It starts with thoughts, and thoughts always lead to action, right? So the thoughts that we consistently think on lead to the actions that we live out. So thoughts lead to actions. Actions lead to habits or rhythms or disciplines, however you want to say it, right? And so it goes thoughts, actions, habits, and then habits always lead to outcomes. And it's the same cycle that all of us go through because your outcomes then lead to thoughts. So it just recycles back around. We live this thing out in every single area of our lives. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take the next 2 episodes and we're going to talk through the cycle, the specific areas of the cycle, thoughts to actions, actions to habits, habits to outcomes. And we're going to diagnose our health in each of those areas, each of those parts of the cycle. And then we're going to try to figure out what do we need to work on to break destructive cycles and build life-giving cycles that are going to take us closer to the purpose God has for us. Because as we're chasing the purpose God's placed within us, it's a constant journey of getting better, healthier, stronger, and moving the front lines forward closer to the purpose God is put in us. That's why we call this the purpose project, not the purpose moment. It's a project. It's a continuous journey towards getting better, healthier, stronger, and moving closer to the purpose God has put within us. And as we begin to live out the purposes in our lives, it's imperative. It is highly, highly important that we learn how to stop dangerous and destructive cycles and keep the momentum going to build life-giving cycles. Honestly, that's why most people begin thinking through this stuff at the beginning of every year. That's why January is a good time to start thinking about the cycles that we want to break and the cycles we want to build. It gives us a fresh perspective. It's a new year. It's the feeling of a fresh start. And maybe, hopefully this is the year where you and I decide we're breaking destructive cycles. We refuse to get stuck and familiar in them. And we're going to start living the full life that God has put on the inside of us. So let's begin breaking down on spin cycle part 1. Let's break down the first half of the cycle that we all go through. So it all starts with thoughts, all right? Everything begins with a thought. Everything in your life starts with a thought. Turning on this podcast today started with a thought. You thought, I'm going to turn on the Purpose Project podcast. I'm going to hear the new episode. It began with a thought. Going to work today or not started with a thought, right? Drinking too much or too little or whatever it looks like began with a thought, right? Thinking on destructive thoughts and ideas or leaning towards positive thoughts and optimism started with a thought. Everything you're doing right now in your life started with a thought. If you're in the car going to a destination, you thought about the destination and what you needed to do first. It all started with a thought. Here's a reality about people that wake up and their lives, their careers, maybe their marriages have been sabotaged. People don't wake up one day and decide to sabotage their lives. They don't wake up one day and go, you know what I think I'm going to do? Ruin my whole marriage. You know what I think I'm going to do today? I think I'm going to ruin my whole career. That's not how that starts. It starts with small thoughts over the course of a period of time that then lead to the action, right? It then leads to moments. Everything starts with a series of thoughts or a singular thought that then continues to ruminate. We're going to talk about that throughout the series of these talks. In Romans chapter 12, verse 2, it says this. It says to be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Here's what the writer in Romans 12:2 is saying. I want your mind. I want you to be changed and transformed. I want you to shift from destructive to life-giving. I want you to be changed. And it says by the renewing of your mind. In other words, it's not changing your mind, it's renewing. It's making your mind new again. It starts with thoughts. Because here's what I want you to know about thoughts. Your thoughts will determine the direction of your life. Your thoughts will determine the direction of your marriage. Your thoughts will determine the direction of your parenting. It'll determine the direction of your career. It'll determine the direction of your physical health, your mental health, emotional health, spiritual health, your spiritual walk, all those things. Everything in your life moves in the direction of your strongest thoughts. Now, I know what you're thinking. I know you're hearing that and you're going, okay, while I agree with that, I can't control what I think about. To an extent, you're right. You can't control the thoughts that pop up in your mind. You can't control that, right? Like you can create habits and disciplines in your life that create new ways of thinking, neuropathy and all those things that go into the scientific part of it. You can create new pathways that you think differently. In other words, you can create disciplines that cause you to stop going pessimistic and start going optimistic. But that takes a lot of time. So the reality is you can't control the thoughts that pop up in your mind, but you can control how long they stay there. And for many of us, we allow them to stay there entirely too long. The scripture continues when it says to be transformed by the renewing of your mind. It says, then once you've gone through the change, the transformation of making your mind new again, changing your mind, changing what you think about, how you think about it, changing how long destructive thoughts stay there. It says, then after that, then you will be able to test and approve the perfect and pleasing will of God. Here's what it's saying. The purposes and the will of God in your life, once you learn how to control the thoughts of your life, you'll be able to see more clearly the will and the purposes of God in your life. Here's the truth. We all eventually accept what we consistently think on. It's just a reality. It doesn't mean you like it, but you'll accept it. It doesn't mean that you champion it, but you'll live by it. It doesn't mean that you sit there and go, I love this negative thought that's in my life, this destructive thought that has taken over all of my joy and all of my happiness and everything I'm doing in my life. The reality is you don't have to like it, but when you consistently think on it, you are now accepting it. You're now allowing it to become a part of your life. So here's what I would tell you on what you need to do. And we're going to dive way more into this in a couple of episodes. It's this. Take your thoughts captive. Paul in the New Testament talks about taking your thoughts captive and testing them against truth. Here's the truth you need to test your thoughts against. If you're a believer, if you're a follower of Jesus, you need to test your thoughts against the truths of God. You also need to test your thoughts against the truth of the situation. Many of us will take assumptions, will allow them to become realities. An assumption is not a reality until it's been tested against truth and it backs up. So you got to take the thought and go, what does God say? Number one. Number two, what does the situation say? What's the truth of the situation, right? If you have a thought, I'm not doing a good job in my career, test it against truth. What are your metrics saying? What are your coworkers saying? What is your boss saying? If they're all saying, no, you're doing exactly what you need to do, plus some, that thought's not true. And so we need to take it that captive and get rid of it. Here's another one. We're going to talk way more about this one too in the last episode of this series of talks. Test it against the truth of others. Talk to others. Sometimes you need to ask this question to people. Hey, I don't know what it's like to be on the other side of me. Can you tell me what that's like? What's it like to be my friend? What's it like to be my coworker? What's it like to be my employee? What's it like to work with me and lead with me? When we aren't cognizant of the thoughts we have in our lives, we become a slave to destructive thoughts. Instead, I want to encourage you, and we'll talk about practicalities in this later. I want to encourage you, don't become a slave to destructive thoughts, but make destructive thoughts a slave to life-giving cycles. So we take them captive and we understand, you have to understand this, everything starts with a thought. Everything starts with a thought. Well, then the importance of that is your thoughts then lead to actions. It leads to the living out, the external expression of your life. So you start with a thought. Maybe it's the thought today that you immediately wake up and it's a negative thought. And so now, you ever heard the phrase, they woke up on the wrong side of the bed? They woke up in a bad mood, right? You just woke up wanting to pick a fight today. Why? Chances are the first thought they had was something negative. Maybe it was something from the day before. Maybe it was something they needed to get done. Maybe it was just a negative thought. If we can replace that with optimism, then our actions become different. We act different. We live different. We externally express differently. Your thoughts will always lead to action. So if you consistently think and focus on negativity, hear me, your actions will soon follow. Now you can take that and flip it on its head. If I consistently think on positivity, my actions will soon follow. If I'm always a victim in my thinking, if everybody's out to get me, nobody understands me, nobody knows what I'm going through, my life is hard, everybody hates me, the old song, nobody likes me, everybody hates me, think I'll eat some worms. Never really understood the last part of that. But if you constantly think of yourself as a victim, you're going to live as a victim. You're going to live like everybody's watching you, everybody's staring at you, everybody's trying to find the problem in your life. You'll begin to live that. If you always think that your spouse can't give you what you need, you'll eventually begin to look in other places. Caveat, I want to say this for the record. The grass isn't greener on the other side. It's greener where you water it, right? So like if your spouse isn't giving you what you need, look introspective and figure out what you can do to water the grass of your marriage better. Just free thoughts there for a moment. Your thoughts will create actions, and the problem is for most of us, our thoughts will create actions before we ever even realize it. So we'll start living in a way that our thoughts, have dictated. And when we begin to do that, and then we get called up or out from people in our life about the way that we're acting and we're different, right? Then we'll begin to go, wait a second, I don't act that way. And chances are you've been a part of one of these conversations. I don't act that way. That's not me. That's not what I'm doing. Are you kidding me? We'll get offended. And then when we start to look back, we're like, oh man, there's truth to that. I am acting that way. Why? It started with a thought somewhere. But if it's true that my negative thoughts create negative living and negative actions, it's also true that positive thoughts create positive actions. So what if we chose to see the best in others, not the worst? I'll tell you what'll happen. When I choose to think the best of others, not everybody's out to get me. I don't have to be guarded against everybody. I can trust people. I can love people. I can connect with people. Not everybody has the worst of intentions, all that stuff. When I start to see the best in people and believe in the best in people, here's what you'll do. You'll start to treat them with greater honor. Start to treat them with love and honor and grace way more than judgment. If I choose to see opportunity, not just problems, I attack life differently. So I look at the situation in my life, and instead of going, man, there's always a problem. There's just always something wrong. I don't know if you've ever heard this phrase, but I've heard this a lot in my life. And there's always something. If it's not one thing, it's another. I have to smile so I don't cry. What if we look at it and go, hey, the situation is not ideal, but let me find the opportunity for growth, the opportunity for grace, the opportunity to grow and get better, to make a difference. What is the challenge? What is the opportunity? You begin to attack the situation, and honestly, you begin to attack your life differently because you're not looking at it and thinking through it as a victim. You're not thinking through it as a problem. You're thinking through it as an opportunity now. You choose to see those things. When I can work on my thoughts, watch this, my actions will follow that. In fact, I love what's said in Galatians chapter 5, 16 and 17. It says, but I say, walk by the Spirit, and you will not carry out the desire of the flesh. For the flesh sets its desires against the Spirit, but the Spirit against the flesh. For these are in opposition to one another, so that you may not do the things that you please. Now, watch this. For those of us walking in a working relationship with Jesus, we got two things working against us. We got our flesh and we got our spirit. Our flesh wants to be negative. Our flesh wants to see problems. Our flesh wants to not trust. Our flesh wants to believe the worst, not the best, right? Our spirit wants to believe we're all brothers and sisters and have a purpose from God. Our spirit wants to see opportunity, not problem. Our spirit lifts ideas, situations, and circumstances, doesn't lower them, okay? Now, we got one in each hand, and the Bible in Galatians 5 clearly tells us they war against each other. They're fighting against one another. So if I'm walking in a working relationship with Jesus, there's going to be this tension, now watch this, to be managed, not a problem to be solved. So there's this tension to be managed between flesh and spirit, to where I want to go off on somebody today, but my spirit is telling me to love them and handle it with grace. I want to be angry, but I'm going to show patience, the fruits of the Spirit. We all go through this battle, and it's all the battle of the cycle. Thoughts lead to actions. Where are my thoughts rooted? That's where my actions are going to come from. When we take our thoughts captive and we filter them through the truth of God, the truth of the situation, and the truth of others in our lives, we can rest assured that eventually our lives and the external expression of our actions will demonstrate the truth of God as well. It will demonstrate the truth of the situation as well. And the thoughts don't have to take root. The thoughts don't have to lead us in a direction we don't want to go. Now, here's a reality, okay? Here's a truth. In society today, it's in a negative cycle. We're fed negative news all the time. You know this. You turn on the news, you turn on social media, you read the headlines, you hear the clips. It's usually revolving around negative headlines. Everything's a problem. Everybody's wrong. Nobody agrees with me. Nobody can be trusted. And I need to be loud about that. I need my opinions to be right. I need my voice to be heard. It creates a miserable life. It creates drama. It creates problems. It's all this negativity. And while there's certainly difficult things happening in the world today, what if we decided that we're not going to see others as enemies, but we're going to see them as brothers and sisters? What if we're not going to see people as morons, if you will, but we're going to look at people with grace? We all have purpose. Yes, even the person you disagree with, even the person you fussed with and got loud with on social media today, right? Even the person that cut you off in traffic, they have a purpose from God just like you do, just like I do. And when we begin to see and listen and think on the negative reaction of society, we look at people as enemies. But when I begin to see the spiritual side and the positive, uplifting side, that we all have purpose and we all have stories that nobody knows anything about, when I begin to see that, I begin to treat people with grace and I begin to treat people with purpose. So what if we decided not to focus on the negative news, but life-giving promises and life-giving cycles and lifestyles? So let me ask you this question as we finish up this episode today. What thoughts are your actions based in? Are they life-giving? Are they life-taking? Are they destructive or are they uplifting? The flesh always benefits me and only me. We're all fighting this flesh and spirit. The flesh is all about, it's got to benefit me. I got to be right. I got to be heard. My opinion is correct. My voting style is correct. My this is correct. And I got to be loud about it. If I don't say it on social media, if I don't get on somebody's post and tell them what I think, if I don't tell people whatever it is, the flesh always benefits me, but the spirit always benefits God and others. So where are my actions based? Flesh or spirit? Which one am I giving into the most? And listen, where your actions are based or where your thoughts are based. So what am I thinking on the most? Now, that was a lot today as we start to look at the cycle. And my hope is that it started some conversation. It started some thinking about the thoughts that we're having and the actions that we're living. And so we will finish this conversation with the next two portions of the cycle next week as we talk about habits and outcomes, because thoughts lead to actions, actions lead to habits, and habits lead to outcomes, and outcomes lead all the way back to thoughts again. This week, my hope is that honestly, you're just sick of the destructive cycles in your life. You're sick of life-taking, life-sucking, destructive thoughts and destructive actions. And what I hope will happen is we will take inventory and decide what needs to go and what needs to stay. I do know this, and I want to be very clear. You'll never fully walk in the fullness of the purpose God has in your life as long as life-giving cycles are not a part of your daily disciplines. Life-giving cycles. You'll never walk in the fullness of the purposes God has for you and have destructive daily cycles. Stop. Hear me today. Please hear me. Stop entertaining and excusing life-taking thoughts and actions. Stop making excuses for them. Well, it's been a hard life. I get that. Today's the day it changes. Today's the day we start making progress. This is the year where it all begins to shift from life-taking to life-giving. Stop making excuses and start making room for life-giving, God-centered truth in your life. It'll change you. It'll change everything about your life, from personal to relational to professional. It'll change everything in your life. And as we do this, I want you to know this. I want you to keep this in mind, because I want to coach a little bit. I want to push a little bit. I want to challenge a little bit through this series, that it's time to stop making excuses. It's time to start making progress. But as we're doing this, it can get a little challenging. So I want you to remember that you matter. You matter. That's why the Purpose Project exists, because you matter. You matter to me. You matter to God, and you matter to others. I want you to remember that you matter. I want you to remember that you have purpose. You have purpose. I know you're going to take inventory and you're going to go, my thoughts are not good. My actions are not good. I really want to change this. And what's going to happen is there's going to be this negative bend to beat yourself up. Stop doing that. Don't take it as getting beat up. Take it as there's an opportunity to get better. You have purpose, and it's great, and it is put there by God Himself. And I want you to remember this. You matter. You have purpose. And the third one, you're a world changer. You're going to make a difference. We change the world one person at a time. You can change the world in your living room. You can change the world starting with your family, starting with your coworkers, starting with your friends. You can change the world by changing thoughts and actions that lead to habits and outcomes. So here's what I want to do. I want you to go and take inventory this week. What are the thoughts? What are my actions? Are they what they need to be? And if they're not, what do I need to do to change? And then come back next week and let's talk again about continuing to work on our purpose as we take inventory and work on our habits and our outcomes. Let's go put in the work this week. Let's get after it. I'll see you next week.